Today, we're going to replace this rear main seal on this 2010 Volkswagen Tiguan using a conventional or traditional automatic transmission with a torque converter. Not to be mistaken for VW's popular 6-speed DSG transmission used in almost every other model that has that 2-liter TSI engine in it, like the EOS, the GTI, the GLI, the CC, the Beetle, and some Audi models. You can see the oil cooler here is on the top, as well as a DSG oil filter on the top that is required to be replaced every 40,000 miles. This transmission is a little bit more maintenance hungry, but it's more of a performance transmission and shifts way faster at just 8 milliseconds between shifts, instead of that slush box, as we call it, automatic transmission used in the Tiguan that has that torque converter. As you can see down here, we have a pretty good oil leak. You can see the little drip right there between the bell housing and the engine. This is the most common sign of a rear main seal leak. It has been leaking for a while and there's oil everywhere, so it's going to make this job a little bit more sticky, but this transmission has got to come out. We're back up top, so we're going to start with removing this complete air intake system, including this, and that pipe right there. We're going to also remove the battery so we can get a better view of this transmission. And now we have this big open space right here and a perfect view of the transmission. We're now going to remove this lower boost hose so we can get a better access to remove these coolant lines that are bolted to the transmission. Then we're going to come back up top and we're going to disconnect all these electrical wires going to the starter, as well as the shift linkage and this main harness to the... Now that we got all this disconnected and out of the way, we can now take this bolt out so we can take these coolant lines off. All right, got the drain pan because it's probably going to go bloosh. Let's pull this thing out of here. And everything up top is all disconnected, including the starter and the shift linkage and all that. So I think we're ready to jack this car up. Let's take this tire off and see what we got to do down there. This Tiguan does have Volkswagen's 4Motion all-wheel drive, so it does have this transfer case that's got to come out first before the transmission. Before we can take this out, we have to take all the axles out. So we have these two CV axles on both sides of it, but before we take those out, we have to take these 3 nuts off the bottom here so we can remove the lower ball joint, giving us enough room to push this whole knuckle that way so we can pull these CV axles out of it. Then we have to disconnect this rear drive shaft that comes out the back here that goes to the rear diff, but I think that's just 3 bolts and that's got to come out. Gotta love it. There it is. The transfer case is out. Now we have this clear view to the nuts that hold the flywheel and the torque converter together. We'll have to turn the engine over by hand with a 24 mil wrench, so that way spin this flywheel around till all the nuts show up into this opening, pull them out one at a time. Then we have to support the weight of the engine and the transmission separately before removing all the transmission bolts that hold the engine and transmission together. Then we'll remove the mount that holds it to the body and lower the transmission to the floor. I've got all my nuts taken off the torque converter, and I went ahead and took this dog bone mount, or this pendulum mount here for the engine. We're now ready to unbolt the transmission from the engine. I'm going to get a jack under here, support the weight of the engine, and take those motor mounts off first. We're going to remove these 3 bolts. These are for the motor mount. And then, once it's supported on this chain fall, we're going to let it down a little bit and start unbolting the transmission from the engine. And we got to pull it out this way without dropping that torque converter, and then lower it down. I've unbolted the transmission from the engine and used a pry bar to pry it away. Now it's loose. So you can see it swings freely away from the transmission. Now we're just going to take our chain fall control chains and just lower it down. Looks like I forgot to unplug something. And there it is, our Tiguan transmission out, finally. With our transmission finally out, we can remove all of these bolts that hold this. And finally, our rear main seal. There it is. Let's zip this thing off here and see what it looks like. And as always, I have these garbage OEM rear main seals. This one's no exception. What happens is it comes unadhered from the tin because these things are made like garbage. So that is a completely blown out. Definitely it was leaking. We'll get a new seal in there and we'll put her back together. We now have to clean out or clean off all of this black silicone all around here so we can reapply it to our part so we can put our new seal on here. Our surface is all clean and we got our new rear main with our fresh bead of silicone on there. We got our brand new rear main seal on there now. I'm going to show you this one other seal that we're going to replace before we put this trans back. And that is this torque converter seal. Since it's so hard to get to, you got to do all this work to get the transmission out to get to it. It's always a good idea, good insurance to go ahead and replace it. It's like $7 for a brand new one. So pick this one up. I'm going to go ahead and put that in there before we put this guy back in. We've got our flex plate in there. All the bolts are torqued up. We're finally ready to put our trans back in. Transmission's back in. Got it hooked to the body of the car. It's all torqued into the engine. Now it's time to go through and put all these nuts back on that torque converter. We got all our torque converter nuts on, and we're ready to put this transfer case in. And we just got that transfer case up in there. So now we're going to put these rear axles on both sides, put this rear drive shaft on. Let's do it. We got our axles hooked up. Now let's put this dog bone mount in here just like this. We're going to put our lower ball joints back on. Then we're going to come over here and reconnect our coolant lines. Now we're going to go ahead and hook up all these connectors down here. Then come back up top and connect the main transmission harness as well as the shift linkage. Last thing we got to do down here is install this boost hose that goes from the intercooler here all the way up to the throttle body up top. Alright, now that's all done down below. We've got this thing down sitting on the floor. I also cleaned the transmission while I had it out. That's why it looks so nice and pretty. We're now going to put this battery tray back in, as well as the intake air cleaner. And we'll throw the battery in there, and I think we're done. Well, there we are. The rear main seal has been replaced, as well as that torque converter seal. And that's pretty much all it, that entails with doing that job. It's a lot of work. Let me tell you, it's a lot of work just to replace that one seal. This one was leaking really bad. Most of your Tiguans, GTIs, GLIs, all that stuff between 09 and 2017, we're going to have this problem with that rear main seal going bad prematurely. This vehicle only has 86,000 miles on it, and that seal was completely destroyed, and it was just dumping oil all over the place. So I have an updated double seal version that they have not had any problems with since the update. I threw one of those in there, so it should be good for life. But yeah, this is a lot of work, but it's worth it because now it should never leak again. But yeah, working on Volkswagens is the beans.